What is your idea of slavery? Is it of an abolished activity that no longer exists? Or if it does, then it is only a minor incident that occurs in some faraway country, an issue that will never affect you. How many types of slavery do you think there are? 3? 10? There are actually 14 different types of slavery. Chattel slavery, debt bondage, forced labor, sex slavery, child sex slavery, wage slavery, contract slavery, early enforced marriage, child labor, trafficking, slavery by descent, slavery at gunpoint, peonage, false criminal charges made, trial by corrupt court, and sentenced to work in mine, and child soldering. All of them are still happening today all around us. Slavery has been defined by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime as the status or condition of a person whom control is exercised to the extent that the person is treated like property. The slave trade has changed from an open, everyday activity to an invisible problem that most people try to ignore or are unaware of. It is a problem that affects everyone, either directly or indirectly, and can be seen in every country in the world. Slavery has been part of our history ever since the ancient times. When a battle was fought and won, the winning army would go off and capture the surviving people on the opposite side, either killing them or taking them into captivity as slaves. But the first time slavery has entered modern history is during the Portuguese expeditions of the 15th century AD. Through these voyages, Africa and the Cape Verde Islands were opened to the slave trade and to modern society. Soon the slave trade grew in the European countries and in America, the latter starting in 1619 to the English colonies in North America. The British Empire grew in size during the new imperialist era of about 1871 to 1914, obtaining colonies in Africa, America, India, Canada, and Oceania. Colonies in Africa became a good resource for the slave traders, and the supply seemed endless. They shipped the indigenous peoples out, taking as many as 600 in a ship that was only built for 451. These ships were brutal, and many people often died while taking the voyages across the Atlantic. Disease festered on board, and supplies were limited. If the captain thought that they wouldn't make it to the nearest port without running out of food or water, they would throw slaves off the sides of the ship to drown. One particular case really shows the brutality of the slave trade, according to Anti-Slavery International. The Zong case came into the spotlight in 1783, telling of a story of a captain throwing overboard 133 enslaved Africans in order to claim the insurance money from the ship's owners. This caused an outcry from the public, allowing anti-slavery committees to step up and fight. It was still many years until the slaves were free, but governments gradually abolished the breach in human rights. Britain in 1838 and America in 1865. But the want for cheap labour and entertainment has ensured the slave trade's survival, even after the change in attitude towards it. There are many different types of slavery, but the biggest and the most profitable will be debt bondage, the sex slave trade, and human trafficking and child labour. Debt bondage occurs mostly in the rural parts of India, Nepal, and Pakistan, but can be anywhere. It is where people are forced to pay off loans and debts through physical labour instead of currency or goods. After working all day for the loaners, the people have no or little money to pay for the necessities of living, like food, clean water, and clothes, as they don't get paid. The workers don't even know how much they owe, so the loaner can change the amount as much as they want. This type of slavery is often generational and can sometimes be a traditionally accepted activity. According to the UN Subcommission on the Promotion and Protection of Human Rights, in India alone there are 40 million bonded labourers, 80 to 98% of them coming from communities labelled as untouchable. An untouchable in Indian Hinduism is the name given to a member of a lower caste in India whose touch is believed to defile a high caste Hindu, and the discrimination is still seen in communities today. Out of those who are in bonded labour, 97.5% are male, 72% are married, 80 to 91% are illiterate, and 80% are in agricultural work. A UN study also states that across the 4,000 brick kilns in Pakistan, up to 700,000 persons are in debt bondage, over half of them women and children. The study does include the workers in the rug weaving factories, where it is known to have a large proportion of debt-bound workers and child labourers. The government of Nepal tried to outlaw debt bondage, but it has successfully made tens of thousands of families to be kicked out by the landlords with nowhere to go. Both India and Pakistan have laws against debt bondage, but the same result as Nepal has occurred. The second biggest, but undoubtedly the most profitable type of slavery is the sex trade and human trafficking. The sex trade has been in our history for years, going back to the Greek and Roman empires. At the peak of the Roman Empire, 1 in every 3 people were thought to be slaves, most of them having been captured in foreign wars and taken to be concubines, domestic servants, or to be put into the entertainment industry. In World War II, the Japanese and the Nazis both put brothels in the soldiers' camps to supposedly decrease the risk of STDs and homosexuality, as well as to reward those who worked hard. It has been estimated that 100,000 to 400,000 female sex slaves were forced to have sex with the Japanese soldiers before and during World War II, with the number of rapes probably exceeding 10 million. In the Nazi camps, around 200 to 300 non-Jewish women were forced to work in over 10 brothels in Germany, Austria, and Poland. The women were subject to STDs, abortions, and medical experiments. Today, the sex slave trade racks up around $20 billion every year, with an estimated 10 million women and over 100 million children within the commercial sex trade, including prostitution, sex tourism, and pornography. Other sexual exploitation can include in-family abuse, rape, pedophilia, and forced marriages. Most of the time, slaves have been trafficked or have been beaten, traded, or bartered. According to Project Respect, an Australian agency working against the sex slave trade, says that when the women enter Australia or any other country, they do not know that their passports will be taken from them, that they will be deprived of their liberty, unable to refuse sex without a condom, beaten, and made to fear for their and their family's safety. Most of the time, the women don't even know that they are going to be put into the sex trade. Some think they are going on holidays or are going to find work as a dancer. Estimates made by Childwise in Australia say that around 300 Asian women are trafficked into Australia to pay off debts in the sex slave trade, whereas over 1,000 women in total are forced into prostitution in Australia each year. The average age of entering into prostitution is between 13 and 14 years old, and if the brothels are raided, 90% of the time the prostitute will be arrested and convicted, where only 10% of the time the pimp or owner will be held accountable. 79% of prostitutes have been beaten by pimps. 79% have been physically abused or assaulted by the pimps and brothel owners, and 50% have been raped by clients. Even the local police don't try to prevent it, instead siding with the pimps. One international affairs investigator of the International Labour Organization states that the Deputy Chief and Chief of Police in Bosnia and Herzegovina get payoffs and girls whenever they want and for as long as they want. The Chief of Uniformed Police know about this and is also involved. He appoints the patrols, where to go and what to see. Groups like Destiny Rescue and Anti-Slavery International are trying to stop the sex slave trade by saving the women in brothels and rehabilitating them. But as long as there are profits that can be made in the trade, organizations can only save individuals, not stop the whole trade. Child labor can be defined in Article 32 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child as economic exploitation and performing any work that is likely to be hazardous or to interfere with a child's education, or to be harmful to the child's health or physical, mental, spiritual, moral, or social development. Child labor is another type of slavery that people in the Western societies come into contact with, although not directly. Through the making of carpets and rugs, tea, cotton, sugar, and chocolate, children have been forced to work long hours and in dangerous conditions, being paid next to nothing for their work. The International Labour Organization states that there are about 250 million children between the ages of 5 and 14 who are in child labour, 150 million of them doing full-time work. Asia has the largest amount of working children, with 61% of the world's total number of children labourers, but 41% of African children are working, the biggest proportion of a country. The United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF, states that in one small carpet factory in Asia, children as young as 5 were found to work from 6 in the morning until 7 at night for less than 20 cents a day. In another, they sat alongside adults for 12 to 14 hours in damp trenches, dug to accommodate the carpet looms on which they wove. In a garment factory, 9-year-olds worked around the clock sewing shirts for 3 days at a stretch, permitted only 1 2-hour breaks, during which they were forced to sleep next to the machines. India has been found to have the most children labourers, with a total coming to about 161.5 million children, all under the age of 16. Slavery is not an issue that can be easily pushed to the side. It is not a faraway country's problem that doesn't affect Australians or any other developed country. It is here among people's everyday lives. They just don't want to see it or hear about it. Modern slavery has grown to gigantic proportions, either in debt bondage, the sex slave trade, or child labour, and the world now has more slaves in it than ever before. Slavery is a breach of human rights and ruins lives, families, communities, and countries. It is an export and import the world can deal without.